We carry on our series of talks on retreats in daily life. Today, we take up two topics, two parables. First, the parable of the persistent widow, and the second, the incident of Jesus with the Syrophoenician woman. We take the first one, the parable of the persistent widow, or the parable of the persevering widow. This is found in Luke chapter 18, verses 1 to 8. Luke chapter 18, verses 1 to 8. In this parable, there are two characters. There is a man and there is a woman. The man is a judge. The woman is a widow. The judge stands for power, for authority. The widow is powerless. She is defenseless. She is unprotected. She is vulnerable. If we go by traditional thinking, the judge, who is very powerful, will win in the end. But the parable, as Jesus teaches us, is different. In the parable story, it is the widow that wins. The underdog wins. The widow had everything against her. She had no money. She had no panel of judges, of lawyers with her. She did not even have a powerful voice to have herself heard. The judge was no respecter of God, neither was he a respecter of man. When we say he was not a respecter of God, it means he was unethical. He was a person with no sense of morality. He was a person with no principles. When we say the judge was not a respecter of persons, it means he was a person with no compassion. He was hard-hearted. He did not take up the case. He would not take up the case without a bribe. That is, for all practical purposes, the woman has no chance of winning. She has no chance of being heard. Only one thing kept going for her: the justness of her cause. This widow, she persists. She perseveres. She kept on keeping on. She did not give up. She did not give in. And she breaks down the resistance of the judge. Eventually, she gets her case heard. Prayer can and does change the mind of God. prayer can and does change the mind of God. The final verse of the parable ends with a question from Jesus. He says, "Will he find faith on earth when he comes?" In other words, we ask ourselves during this retreat a question like this: do we believe that God will answer our prayer? Do we give in too early when our prayers are unanswered? What keeps us from persevering in prayer? This is as far as the first parable goes. Now we take up another passage, the encounter of Jesus with a Syrophoenician woman. This is found in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verses 24 to 30. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verses 24 to 30. It is the encounter of Jesus with the Syrophoenician woman who was blessed with the gift of repartee. Now, what is a repartee? A repartee is the ability to give a quick and witty reply. In other words, she was good in sparring with words. She was sparring with Jesus. Now, as you begin this passage, we realize that Jesus is now no longer in Jewish territory, but in Gentile territory, non-Jewish territory. And this is not by accident. In the previous incident in this passage, it shows Jesus as wiping out differences between clean food and unclean food. There is no such thing as unclean food, and there is no such thing as clean food. All food has been blessed and given to us by God. Is it possible then that He is now wiping out the differences between clean and unclean people? And we are prejudiced. We make distinctions between good people and bad people, our people and not our people. Now, to understand the story, we need to understand a few concepts. There's that word dog, and Jesus compares her to a dog. To be called a dog can be a deadly insult. It could also be used in an affectionate way, an affectionate address. But much depends on the tone of voice and the facial expression. But on the whole, the use of the word dog is an insult. Then you have bread being used. Bread. Now, in those days when people ate, they did not use knives and forks. Neither did they have table napkins. They ate with their hands. And when you eat with your hands get soiled. And so they wiped their soiled hands onto pieces of bread, chunks of bread. They used to wipe it. And then after wiping their hands with that, they flung the bread away. And the house dogs ate them. Now in this encounter, the Syrophoenician woman comes to Jesus and pleads with him and says, my daughter is possessed with a demon. Please come and cure her. Take away the demon from her. Let her be made well again. And this is how Jesus replies to her. He tells her, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. It is not right to take the children's bread and to toss it to the dogs. She is a Gentile, he is a Jew, and the Gentiles and the Jews look down on the Gentiles. Now when he says this to her, this is how she replies. The woman is not deterred. She is not taken aback, and she responds in such a manner that she beats Jesus' response and turns his metaphor of the dog to her advantage. How does she answer Jesus? Jesus says, it is not right to take the children's bread and to toss it to the dogs. And she replies, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Jesus is so taken up with her reply. He is taken up. And he makes it explicit when he says, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. In other words, Jesus accepts that she has won the argument. And the woman goes home and she finds her child lying on the bed, the demon gone. She finds her child lying on the bed, the demon gone. In other words, what is this encounter teaching us? No one has the power to hurt or insult us. No one has the power to hurt or insult us unless we decide to give that person that power. It is we who decide to give that person power or not. When someone says something, I need to decide whether I will sulk because I find it insulting, or whether I will use what he has said to learn something about myself and use it to my advantage. In other words, the story tells us, you have the power. You and I have the power to withstand any insult hurled against us. When at first we do not succeed, do we try and try again? So in short, today we have reflections on two parts of the Gospel. The first is from Luke chapter 18 on the persevering or persistent widow. And the second is the encounter of Jesus with a Syrophoenician woman who had a gift of repartee and answered Jesus well. We pray and ask the Lord that like them we might persevere and persist in our attempts to get God's grace into our lives. We will now pause a while and pray before the Blessed Sacrament, which will be exposed.
Tomorrow we have masses at 6:30 in the morning, at 12 noon, and the evening at 7 p.m. we continue the retreat in daily life. Thank you for joining us. Good night and God bless you all.